Hi everyone, and welcome to the next live session based on my book Beyond Asanas. These sessions are in honor of Yoga Day because a lot of you might know that my book Beyond Asanas, this was my first book and it was published on Yoga Day. So every year I try to revisit it. And this year I thought that I'm going to be I want to look at every single chapter that I wrote about so many years ago and just see what else I can get out of it. Just sort of, just revive the stories once again for everybody. So chapter 7, we're on chapter 7 of the book. Again, the book is Beyond Asanas and chapter 7 is called Kurmasana. Now, kurma also means tortoise. That's the Sanskrit word for tortoise. And the imagery of the tortoise is it's popular across cultures. And in fact, there's the hare and the tortoise story, which, all of us learned as children. And that story, although, when we learned it, we didn't think too much about it, but that story also talks about perseverance. It teaches children who eventually become adults that perseverance is very important. And as adults, when we look at the story of the hare and the tortoise, you can see that it means that, if you stay true to your goal and true to what you want in life, and you work hard and consistently with perseverance, you can definitely achieve your goals. So there are many stories related to turtles and the tortoise, also in Hindu mythology. And in fact, when I was writing this, a lot of people asked me, what's the difference between a turtle and a tortoise? And the only difference is that the tortoise, well, there are many differences, but the main difference is that the tortoise is a land animal. And so its feet, its legs are designed for the land, whereas tortoise spends predominantly, the turtle spends predominantly most of its time in the water. And so, its limbs and everything are designed for the water. So that's the main difference between the tortoise and the turtle. And when we think about the Kurmasana, we're basically talking about the turtle. So now there are two stories. So every chapter, for every single asana, I've written a couple of stories. So this particular asana has two stories. Now the first story is one that I've written about before also. It's about the nectar of immortality. So the story goes that there was a time when the devas and the asuras, they had a big disagreement. There was a huge disagreement, a misunderstanding actually, and the devas were cursed. And they were cursed that they would lose their immortality, they would lose their strength, they would lose their power. And because of that, what would happen is that the asuras would be able to overpower them and actually take over their kingdom. And the devas would eventually die out, and the asuras would take over the entire world. And the devas got really worried about this, and they went to Lord Vishnu. And they told Vishnu that, this has happened and there's been this huge misunderstanding. So what should we do? What is can you give us some guidance? And Vishnu told them that, yes, if you drink the nectar of immortality, then, you do stand a chance against, this curse that's on you. And then definitely, then the asuras won't be able to overpower you because you'll get your immortality back. And so, the devas trusted him and they said, okay, fine. And so then there was the whole Samudra Manthan that happened to, obtain the nectar of immortality. And that's a story that I spoke about in a previous chapter also, because it's one of the more important stories in the Hindu epics. And for this Samudra Manthan, what they needed to do was they had to churn the ocean. And so for that, what they needed a long stick of some kind, and they needed like a rope. So then they could wrap the rope around this stick and, sort of churn it, and then the nectar of immortality would kind of rise up. So the rope was actually Vasuki the snake, so he volunteered. He said, you can use me as the rope. And then they needed a huge, long stick. And this ocean that was there was so big that a little stick, any stick that you would find on earth would not suffice. So what happened was Mount Mandar said, okay, I volunteer to be this stick. So you wrap Vasuki around me, and you churn me, and and then this nectar will come out, and the devas can drink this nectar, and the world will continue. But what happened was, the moment they started to churn this Mount Mandar was so heavy. It was a mountain after all. It was so heavy that it started to sink down. And when that happened, the whole experiment, this whole endeavor that they had was going to fail. So Vishnu, everybody was like, okay, Lord Vishnu, what should we do? We're in trouble again. And Lord Vishnu thought very quickly. He was like, okay, he had to think on his feet, and he had to think very quickly before time was up. And he said, okay, let me do something. And what he did was, he turned into a turtle, and he crawled under Mount Mandar, and then he held the mountain up. And then the devas were able to finally churn the ocean, and the nectar of immortality came up. Devas were able to drink it, and then everything was fine again. So this is the first story. And it's a very interesting story. It keeps coming up repeatedly in many, for various different yogasanas. There are many different interpretations and many different versions of the story also. So this is one that I wrote about in this chapter. This is chapter 7, Kurmasana of the book. Now the next story that I've spoken about in this chapter is about sage Kashyap. Okay, who was one of the most powerful sages in the Hindu pantheon. He's still quite revered. He was revered back then also, and we still revere him. And Kashyap in Sanskrit actually also means turtle. And sage Kashyap was so learned, and he was so wise, that a lot of the hymns in the Rig Veda are attributed to him. A lot of the things, the shlokas that are written, they say, the author is sage Kashyap. And he was also one of the Sapta Rishis. So the Sapta Rishis were the 7 rishis who were born out of the mind of Lord Brahma. So they actually had his brains. So he's considered that important and that revered in Hindu mythology. And because he was a sage, he spent a lot of time studying the Vedas and other religious texts. And the story goes that Lord Brahma had another son called Daksha, and he was a king. And King Daksha had 13 daughters, and he revered and respected Lord Kashyap, sage Kashyap, so much that he requested him to marry all of his 13 daughters. So at that time, polygamy was probably allowed. Nobody really even thought about it. And sage Kashyap didn't really, according to some stories, he wasn't really interested in doing that, wasn't really interested in having 13 wives. He was more interested in a life of contemplation and spirituality. But at that time, there was a need to populate the world. The earth was sparsely populated. Lord Brahma was creating the world. And sage Kashyap had promised Lord Brahma that he would help him populate the world with wise men and women. So now when King Daksha said, okay, can you marry my 13 daughters? Sage Kashyap thought that actually this is a chance for him to have many children from these 13 women, and actually, populate the earth with his progeny, and help him help Lord Brahma's cause. And so later on in the Hindu pantheon, there are many sages and learned men who actually attribute their origins to sage Kashyap. So he's a very influential figure in Hindu mythology. He's very important, and he's very revered. So that was the second story. The second story is called The Sage with the Many Wives, sort of talking about how, sage Kashyap didn't want to have so many wives. He wanted a life of contemplation, but seeing the larger good, the greater good, and the promise that he had made to Lord Brahma, he agreed to marrying King Daksha's daughters. So the significance and symbolism, there's so much in these two stories. Particularly, when you think about, when you think about Lord Vishnu, and when the Samudra Manthan was failing, and the way he thought on his feet, the way he thought quickly, and how he didn't get overwhelmed by what was happening. That is sort of like how how we think a tortoise really walks, with a lot of deliberation, never losing steam, in a very controlled and very easy pace. The pace is always, it never goes too fast nor too slow. It's a very even pace. So that is how Lord Vishnu thought, and hence he was able to help the cause of the Samudra Manthan. So that is one kind of symbolism that we see in that story. Like I mentioned in the beginning, even the hare and the tortoise story teaches us that. It teaches us that, even if you're slow, but if you keep persevering, and if you keep your eyes on the goal, it is possible for even something slow like the tortoise to win against a hare. And in a lot of ways, we can compare the sun to a tortoise also. Both the sun and the tortoise, they move very slowly. And the sun, remember, in the practice of yoga, we consider the sun to be the only source of energy. But it's ironic that the only source of energy does not go too fast. Okay, it doesn't burn too bright nor too less. It burns with a constant speed at all times, and it goes with a constant pace. So that's how we can actually compare the sun and the tortoise. And in this book, what I've done is I've also spoken about the significance in a small, like a summary. So I would like to read that out. The first significance is that the tortoise withdraws into its shell to rest. Similarly, we need to recoup and rejuvenate at regular intervals to live life to our fullest potential. So this again goes back to the hare and tortoise story, that with an even pace and with regular breaks and with smart breaks, you can actually achieve what you want. You can actually achieve your fullest potential. But if you have fits and starts in the way you achieve things, then that's not really a good recipe for success. The second thing that I have spoken about, the second significance, is that it is important for human beings to recognize feelings of fear and vulnerability and resist the overwhelming temptation to run. Instead, we need to calmly assess the situation and decide on the best course of action to protect ourselves. Emotional security and freedom from anxiety come only by facing life instead of running from it. So this is exactly what we see in the Samudra Manthan. If Lord Vishnu had when the experiment was failing and he the mountain was sinking, if he had become overwhelmed by it, then he wouldn't have been able to help out. But because he maintained a sense of calm and peace, he was able to actually find a solution. So that's what this pose teaches us. It's the tortoise pose, Kurmasana, that with a sense of perseverance, with calmness, with regular practice, you can actually achieve the pose that you want and anything else that you want in life. Also, since we're talking about the pose, another thing about the pose to remember is that initially when we start practicing the Kurmasana, it feels very claustrophobic. Like to go down and extend your arms out, it feels very claustrophobic. However, with consistent practice, if you can just overcome that feeling of claustrophobia and that discomfort, over time, the posture actually feels a lot better. There is a sense of freedom in the posture. Your body opens up so much that there's that sense of real freedom in the body. So again, that goes back to the symbolism of the tortoise, that you can feel claustrophobic. When the tortoise draws into its shell, it can feel claustrophobic, but sometimes it needs to do that to overcome some kind of threat or some kind of resistance. And once that is gone, then it can extend its legs out again and move on. So that's what we see with the symbolism and significance of the Kurmasana. So this was chapter 7 in my book, Beyond Asanas. And if you have any questions about what we've spoken about today or anything else about Hindu mythology or my book, do drop a comment. Check out yesterday's live, and be back tomorrow for another live session based on my book, Beyond Asanas. Thank you, everybody. Bye.